The first mention of the word koinonia in the New Testament is in Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, you may know Acts chapter 2. It's a fascinating book, the book of Acts. You can read all the way through it. In Acts chapter 2, you find the first fellowship established after Jesus' ascension into heaven. And they meet together, and they meet together every day. And it says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. That's Acts chapter 2. Verse 42. And notice they devote themselves to fellowship, to koinonia. That's the first time the word koinonia is used. They devote themselves to koinonia, being with one another, which is important, and being with God. So when you talk about fellowship, sometimes you think, oh yeah, we got together, we had a time of fellowship, we had a pizza, or whatever, or we watched the telly, or we went to the pictures, Well, it's only true koinonia fellowship if we're meeting together, but we're also meeting with the Lord. And it's not that hard to do. I mean, you can go to the cinema for Jesus. I mean, admittedly, you've got to sit there and watch the film, but afterwards you can have koinonia fellowship. And all the way through, as you're watching a film, you might be saying, whoa, what would the Lord make of this? And what should I make of this as a Christian? You can still be talking, you can still be praying, you can still be having fellowship with God and having fellowship perhaps with one another when you're able to speak to one another, all right? Then, after that, we find numerous bits and pieces about it. And it's really those I want to focus on tonight. The nature of fellowship, the nature of koinonia. In Romans chapter 12, verse 10, it says, be devoted to one another in love. And in the same verse, honor one another above yourselves. Two things that mention the two words together, one another. Fellowship is all about one another. It's all about being together in God. So here's our first instruction. Be devoted to one another in love. Church is an interesting thing. It throws together all sorts of people who can be all very different. It would be very dull, wouldn't it, if all churches were exactly the same? And the people, when you went to church, there were people just like you. There are churches like this, of course. There are churches where very, like-minded type, people who do the same things from the same sort of background. They form a majority. And the healthiest sort of churches are churches that have all sorts of different people, all involved, all thrown together into this big mixing pot. And inevitably, because the way that churches grow, the real way that churches grow, is for you guys and me, all of us together, to sort of share the message with our friends, with our neighbours, our work colleagues or whatever, people at school, and say, why don't you come along to church? And so there's a great chance that you could get quite a lot of people who are kind of like you being in your fellowship, but always there are going to be people who are different. And there's the first challenge straight away, because if you've got people who are very different to one another, you might, say you were here this morning, you might have looked at a few people in the room and thought, oh gosh, they're not like me at all. And I wonder if I went and greeted them, what would I say to them? I wouldn't know what to say. I wouldn't know how to communicate with them. What if we've got nothing in common? It'd be hopeless, wouldn't it? It'd be rubbish. And you usually find if you make the effort and you do sort of communicate with people who are might appear to be very different to you, you discover that actually people are people. And we're all remarkably similar at base level. And if we have our faith in common, then we've kind of got everything in common. So we're asked to be devoted, express devotion towards one another. That everybody that you meet in this place, in the fellowship and the extended fellowship, they're all very important and we need to be devoted to them. As a husband is devoted to his wife and vice versa, yeah? So Christ is devoted to his church, like a bride and a groom. And we must be devoted to one another. And we must honor one another above ourselves. So there is no place, as we know, for anybody in church, in fellowship, in koinonia, to say, oh, well, I'm very important because I have this important job. Every job is important. As we find out, the body is made in many parts, and they all have their role to play. And some of them are seen, stood at the front, and some of them are never seen. And it doesn't matter, they're all the same. So we've got to honor one another and appreciate what one another does. And then in Romans 12:16, we find another one another. These are all from the NIV, by the way, so you may find in other translations they're slightly different. Live in harmony with one another, it says. Romans 12:16, live in harmony with one another. As much as possible, we are meant to live in peace. We're meant to coexist. We're meant to be beautiful harmony together. And sometimes there's discord, isn't there, in church life? But as far as possible, if it's anything to do with us, and we must always strive for it, we must try and be as one in harmony, yeah? Now, there's a very important part of this, that it's okay, you might say, well, let's compare it to a song that we might sing in harmony together, our various harmonies. The important thing is, we've all got to be singing the same song. Do you know what I mean? It's like if we're all trying to sing different songs in different ways, there will be no harmony. So we have to establish as a fellowship, as a koinonia, and I was on about it this morning, Lord, where are you taking us? Which path do you wish us to take? And we need to nail it, the path, and we need to get our feet upon it, and then we all need to travel together. So you get discord, you get a break in koinonia if you get people who say, well, they might want to go this way, but I want to go this way. You will ultimately find yourself isolated. And then some people start to blame the fellowship for this. Oh, well, they never bother with me. When actually it's not the fellowship's fault. It's kind of like you want to do things the way that you think you want to do things, when God has got a different plan. So sometimes we have to be very gracious with one another. We have to live in harmony with one another. We're called to do it by God. In Romans 15, verse 7, it says, accept one another, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. Don't have people that you don't have anything to do with. Accept one another. And when you accept something, you don't sort of query it. You don't say it isn't good enough. Christmas is a coming. It'll be here before the end of this month. And when you get your Christmas presents on Christmas morning, chances are there'll be one or two that you unwrap and you have to do that sort of awards ceremony face. You see them at the Oscars and things like that, don't you? And like when and the Oscar goes to, and they flash up, they'll sort of make four corners of the screen, but bing, bonk, the four nominees, they're all there, looking like this, and the Oscar goes to, Mr. Smith over there, and Mr. Smith's like, yeah! And then the other three are like, oh, well done, absolutely. You don't often get many going, like this. Accept that you haven't won. Accept that what you did is great, but accept that you haven't won. Accept one another as you are. Don't accept grudgingly. Accept people openly. Don't say, I can't accept that person, they're a sinner. You're a sinner too. We are all tainted with sin. Because we're human, we live in this world. Accept one another. Because, I don't know about you guys, well, I do know about you guys, when Jesus accepted you and called you, he took you just as you are. He didn't say that you had to jump through hoops and fulfill certain tasks before you would be accepted by him. The cross accepted you. In Galatians 5, verse 13, we find another one another. It says, serve one another humbly in love. Be prepared to serve. Be prepared to get your hands dirty and to do it humbly. And there will be times when we are called to serve somebody, and when we've served that person and we've been kind to them, without thanking us, they will just go their merry way. And then what you have to do is say, okay, I did it for God, and so I feel good about it. And the fact is, because the Lord sees everything that we do, even when our acts of kindness, our acts of service for one another don't appear to be noticed, God notices. God notices everything. It all goes in his book of life. He notices what you do. All right? So be proud of the things that you do in that sort of way. In Ephesians 4, verse 32, be kind and compassionate to one another. Kindness and compassion. Be kind and compassionate to one another. It speaks for itself, that one. Colossians 3:16, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom. Wow. Here's another one another. Teach one another, because we're all learning. Every day is a school day. And sometimes we find that if we are elders in the church, we've been Christians for a long time, we have a lot of experience which we can share with people. And sometimes they want to hear it and sometimes they don't want to hear it. But we can share it because we've kind of been there. But then sometimes the way that the kingdom works is that the little child leads them. And sometimes we can learn something from people who are a lot younger than us, younger in the faith. And it does make me laugh rather, well, in a sad sort of way, when people say things to me like, don't forget the people who've been in the church all these years. They've been in the church all these years, as if they, all these years they've been here. You are exactly, if you've been here for like 50 years worshipping here, you are on equal footing with the person who started worshipping here last week. And there is no distinction. And there's a bit of teaching, and there's a bit of humility needed. There are no brownie points for long service. It's not like at school where there's a special award for the highest attendance, for the ticks in the register. It's not like that with Christianity. Yes, you need to turn up for church. You need to get involved. If you just lurk around on the fringes of church, you will be the poorer for it. You'll most definitely be the poorer for it. But we're not sort of chasing you up. We're not rounding you up as some religions might do. Get in church. You've got to get in church. It's up to you. It's so much is placed in your hands, and yet we need to teach one another the right way. And we need to admonish one another as well. We need to tell each other if we feel that there's something wrong. It needs to be done, but it needs to be done with wisdom. So it doesn't need to be done in a sort of putting people down sort of way, but sometimes we just need gently to correct one another in wisdom. And we need, of course, to do it with kindness and compassion, as we heard in the last one. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. So sometimes when we just have to rein one another in just a little bit, also we need to encourage one another and build each other up. That is what it's all about. And when we hear about spiritual gifts and using spiritual gifts in worship, whether they be words of prophecy, words of tongues, whatever they might be, we need to use everything. You can test it quite simply. You can test it quite simply. Is it for the encouragement of the fellowship? Or does it seek to destroy or undermine the fellowship? Or does it seek to make the person delivering that message important? If any of those things are true, then we have to seriously doubt where it's coming from. It's for encouraging the body of Christ, building one another up. Hebrews 10 verse 24, let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. We've got to spur one another on. It's like encouraging, isn't it? But with specifics in mind, love and good deeds. We've got to try and encourage each other to love one another and to do good things. In 1 Peter 4:9, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. I like that. It makes you think that Peter's perhaps come across people who have begrudging, all right, you can stay at our house then, whatever, Do it without grumbling. Do it without grumbling. Whereas it says that sometimes people, by extending hospitality, have welcomed angels without knowing it. The spirit of generosity we need, that's prepared to give for people and to help people out without asking for any reward. 1 Peter 1, verse 22. Love one another deeply from the heart. And there we leave it. When we have fellowship, when we have koinonia, as much as tonight we want to encounter God through worship, through prayer, it's all about serving and sharing with one another. It's all pointing away from us and towards one another, that all may experience God together. So I wonder if you could just do me a little favour. If everybody in the room would like to come and join me and kind of form a sort of circle around this table in the middle, could you do that? Come on, everybody do it. Nothing embarrassing is going to happen. This is going to be for the encouragement and building up of everybody. Can we all kind of get around it? You might have to come up here as well, like we're doing like when we do the communion. You might have to step up onto the platform. We just about make it, can't we? We're there. Budge up, yeah? Can we all get in-ish? Hey, this is good. And then I can stop using this microphone because you can probably hear me.